Broadcasting from the campus of Lynn Benton Community College. We are the Mid-Valley STEM-CTE Hub. I'm your host, Casey, and this is Closing the Gap. You ready?
Yeah.
I'm ready. All right. Welcome back to Closing the Gap. Today I have my colleague, Dr. Dominga Sanchez, with me today. And Dominga recently got her PhD in engineering from OSU, and we're going to talk about the fact that, or the idea rather, that engineering is not for the faint of heart. Welcome.
Thank you.
So a while ago, we've been kind of thinking about this discussion for a while, and a while ago you told me that you went to an event where there were Latinx students at OSU that were in engineering, and you said something that stuck out to me, which was along the lines of, keep going, we need you.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
I was being introduced to a group of undergraduate engineering Latinx students, and there was a vibe, a climate, I guess. And I remember why we were talking about this. It was just after the elections. And this community was concerned about what's going to happen. We've been through this before, and for those of us who did experience a couple of negative comments, then just remembering what happened before and being prepared to endure it again, right? So we were just having these random conversations, and their advisor had introduced me, and they were like, well, how did you do it back then? What did you do? Or what were your experiences? And I started sharing experiences that were painful to remember, because it was not just like aggressive experiences against me, but also against my kids, and how we dealt with it, coming from a very diverse community to a very non-diverse community here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like when I was thinking about you and your experiences in engineering, how I was thinking it was going to be a professional story. Then you mentioned your kids being involved as well. So I'm really looking forward. Well, not looking forward. That seems a little too bright, maybe. But I'm interested to hear more about the story. Yeah.
So the students and I, we were talking about. Well, they were asking me questions about, how did I do it? Any pointers that I can provide. And at the same time, they looked very discouraged. They looked like very tired. And so it's hard, right? It's hard being someone from a historically marginalized group in a very competitive field such as engineering. And for me, as an indigenous, as a Latina, it felt like it was just, I want to say, a little bit harder, but I think the word is like different challenges that I had to encounter that I'm sure a white female wouldn't have encountered. And so that message that I was thinking about is, even though, yes, it is hard, the road is full of barriers, systemic barriers, cultural barriers. We really need our students to move forward because our community needs us. And it's important to, one, find that support, that community that will validate what you're feeling. It's important to respect your emotions, which is what I shared with them. Respect your emotions. What you're feeling is valid. And to find that time to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that. I didn't know what it is to take care of yourself. And if I were to go back to the Dominga who started at community college, I would tell her your priority is to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It seems like burnout's a big problem for students, especially ones that are going into graduate school or into the STEM fields that are a little bit maybe more rigorous when it comes to homework and labs and things like that, where you're heavily involved in your classes. Not to say that people that are in the arts or the humanities aren't, but you also had mentioned a minute ago that I thought was interesting, and if you're comfortable talking about it, um, some intersectionality between being a female and a person of color and an indigenous person pursuing an engineering degree. Would you mind touching on that a little bit more, kind of expanding on it?
yeah, well, just a couple of experiences that I've been through. You know, we were just talking about this earlier. It's like I'm getting a little uh, heated here, but one of my undergraduate classes, we had to mix different ratios of cement and water to make concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And and I was mixing in one of the labs, and I had this random guy just come behind me and be like, "You got it, sweetheart, or do you need some help with that?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Excuse me?" I was like, I can do this. I can mix, right? And
Right.
so that was one of the experiences that really made me realize that these spaces might get a little bit uncomfortable for me. And I still don't know how I overcame them, but I I got stronger over time and learned to not to disregard them, but to defend myself,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. I didn't think I was going to go through similar experiences in grad school, but I did. I do remember one where it was a team project, and my team member asked me, "Well, don't you know how to read English?" And I was
Wow.
like, "Excuse me?" And I don't know what was going on through this person's mind. I'm not gonna reveal genders, but definitely from the dominant culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they were probably having a bad day. I'm not sure, but the teamwork was not flowing, and I had a lot of questions, and we both had the same assignment sheet. But for some reason, she assumed that I did not know how to speak English.
That's wild.
And I was born here. So.
I I mean, just from those couple of experiences that you just shared, I could really see why you would approach that talk with those engineering students as this can be exhausting. You need to take care of yourself perspective. How did they respond to that?
Well, taking care of yourself is not really something that um, they teach us, right? Even from a cultural perspective. What does that look like? And to everyone, it's going to be different. And I think that their curiosity came from that standpoint that, well, what does taking care of yourself look like to you? I'm like, well, to me, taking care of myself is that if I need to cry, I will just let it out. You know, go into my safe space, cry it out, and then come back. If I am physically exhausted, I am going to rest. I mean, you have to listen to your body, to your mind, to your soul. It's a combination of a little bit here and there,
Mm-hmm.
and I did not know how to explain it to them except give them examples, right? If you're feeling sick, if you know you're getting the sniffles, that should be a sign that your body is way too stressed and you need to relax or go on a walk. Detach your mind from all this technical learning and enjoy nature. that to me is taking care of myself. Do something fun, right? Like and I've told you, I love dancing. So dancing was my stress relief. Um, Finding that joy, finding what brings you joy to give you that energy to keep going, right? And the other one was for me was to be with my kids. So being present for my kids, helping them out, that was also part of taking care of myself. But these students weren't parents, so that one did not apply.
But I also think that there is, you're onto something, because cortisol, like the hormone that's released when we're stressed or when we're anxious and things like that, it really does a number on our bodies. And so when you're in it for the marathon, the long haul that is school, and then not for the faint of heart career in engineering, like you need to have those kind of practices in place, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yes. And, I also think that it's hard to know how to nurture yourself.
Ooh, explain.
Like, I know how to be a nurturing person for my kids,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially for the first, 5 to 10 years when they're still little kids, babies, and you want to hug them and coddle them. But how do you do that to yourself? How do you nurture yourself in a way that you're taking care of your own self, especially when you're away from home, you're away from family? What does that look like?
Oh gosh, I mean, I feel like that's something I've been learning as an adult through paid support. But I don't know. I mean, like, if I think about what I do for myself, if I'm going to nurture myself, I think about taking like a hot shower, like a long hot shower, and because I find that to be really calming. And I find that when I need nurturing, it's mostly like grounding and calming. So I think that's maybe my first go-to, or going for a walk to kind of like get some of that energy out.
Yeah, yeah. And I would have to agree because I learned that I love bubble baths.
Nice.
So, right, having that for myself, or going for a spa day, or just, getting my nails done, something nice that, I don't know, for some it may be so basic, but for someone like me who did not have much time,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a special treat for myself. Or even cooking my favorite meal. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what makes, what reminded me of home.
Nice. What do you go to? Like, what's your go-to meal when you're doing self-care, and you want to have something that tastes like home?
Oh, it depends. It depends. Because usually when I cook, I cook for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
But my favorite would be a barbacoa
Ooh.
or pozole.
Yum.
That would be my go-to. I love hot chocolate, but not the hot chocolate from Abuelita hot chocolate. I like hot chocolate from Oaxaca.
Cool.
So making myself a little hot chocolate, and with some bread if there is bread, sweet bread.
Nice.
But that's also like a family moment because my kids love that hot chocolate, and when they know I make that hot chocolate, we all sit together and have some hot chocolate. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
So I think this is really great, and an unexpected turn that we took in our conversation, because we're like laying the groundwork for, we already have some answers of what you can do to help you in this marathon. And I think that one of the things that is like particularly interesting to me when we're talking about people in engineering is how discouraging and cutthroat the fields can be, and how that in itself is a stressful experience. And I'm wondering, as people that are advocates and friends of students that are going into engineering and other STEM fields that are very competitive, what do you think from your experiences make a welcoming and conducive environment to keep going,
Oh, that's a good question.
like school and work?
That's a very good question because I remember as an undergrad, I didn't have that space,
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking for it. It was very challenging because I wasn't a traditional student who just came out of high school and went straight to college. I went to community college and then transferred. And I was a mom. I was a single parent. So finding my community was very challenging because there weren't a lot of single parents in engineering.
Yeah.
But what I have learned over time, and especially after interviewing a couple of students about their experiences, the commonality that have found is providing that space where you are allowed to be who you are. If you want to listen to music, some cumbias. If you want to speak Spanglish, you're allowed, right? If you want to talk about tacos, street tacos. It's finding that space where you see others that look like you, that are having the same challenges like you, validating your experiences, that it's not just you who is experiencing this discrimination or racism, that others are also, right? It's that space. If we can only have that space, but where is that space, right? And I remember the first time I walked through the halls of the engineering department, and there were all these class photos with old black and white photos. It was just white males, white male, white male, white male, white male, white male. And I remember telling myself, like, what were you thinking coming here? But they've made a lot of changes throughout the time that I was there. They brought in a large mirror that says I am Oregon State University, and I took a selfie there because I'm like, yeah, it's true. This is who I am. It's more colorful now, right? And to me, at least, it felt more, just those simple changes made it more welcoming. But if you think about it, like, these spaces are very white dominant spaces. So if you don't see others like you, it just becomes intimidating and hard to find community.
Yeah. I imagine it would be intimidating to show up authentically in a situation like that.
Yes.
I've found a lot of similarities between your experience at OSU and then hearing about women that are like older than me that went through the forestry programs and had similar experiences where they're like, oh, all I saw were people that didn't look like me or didn't have similar experiences to me. Like, I am a female and I'm going into these classes and 90% of the other students or 100% of the other students are male, and it's very intimidating and I feel out of place, and having these experiences of, well, I don't know if I fit and I don't know if I want to go back. And I don't want to spread your story, though I know we've had talks in the office about how you've had experiences through your situation. And what were some of the ways that you were able to talk yourself into keeping going?
Oh, that's a good one. There's always this one story, right? Like, my motivation on what pushed me into this field, and it was remembering my grandfather, because when I first met him, I was 9, and he showed me his house, and he told me how he built it with his own 2 hands, and it was an adobe house. He explained to me the process of making the adobe bricks and why it was important to use local environmental materials. And I was always fascinated by this man because his highest level of education was, I think, elementary. He came here to the U.S. just to work, and then he went back home. And so I remember him just telling me these stories of how he would build structures and the importance of, just keep going. Just keep going, because if our ancestors were able to build these pyramids, I'm from Oaxaca, so we have a lot of pyramids right behind our village. There's Mitla, there's Monte Alban. Actually, Mitla doesn't have pyramids, but they have old structures. And he was like, if they were able to build these structures, you're going to be able to build structures. And even though he wasn't really happy with my career choice, I mean, there's a lot of in between conversations between, me being 9 years old and then me finally deciding what area of study I wanted to go to. There were some very intense conversations about how that's not really a role for me as a woman.
That's so interesting because you took it literally.
Yeah. And but his stories and the way that he motivated me, those stories is what I remembered every time I wanted to quit or be like, this is too hard. Like, no, if my ancestors were able to do this, if my grandfather with only an elementary level education was able to do this, then of course I can do this. It's like, and I did, which was the best part, because he was right.
Yeah.
Right. Like we are all able to pursue our dream, our career. We all have different experiences, and we are capable. We are all intelligent humans. But it's these established systemic barriers that make it challenging for others.
Mm-hmm.
These different available resources that make it difficult for some. And I learned that through not only experiences, but also learning more about how the education system works here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, this is why not everyone can be an engineer, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is why I was able to be successful, I guess, accomplish my goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you were able to navigate the system that you were working within.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes me think of a very personal story of someone not getting the resources that they need with being a perfectly capable human. And because we all have such different learning styles on top of how we grew up or who we are, and the factors are endless. But it's empowering to hear you say anyone can be an engineer, and there are systems and barriers in place that allow people to make it only so far in their given paths. And honestly, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I think I'm feeling a little introspective about it. I think that a lot of people, it's easy to give up, when you hit those barriers and you're tired from the marathon that you've been running for years. A lot of people are, whether you're a traditional student or not, in some way you've been working hard for years and years and years. By the time you make it to that point of graduation and then I think about what the regrets are, if you have any, after giving up. What is enough and what is I need to take a nap. I need to take a bath and, chill out and start again tomorrow. Yeah. I'm kind of I feel like I'm onto something. I'm going to cut this, but
I'll share something as you were saying that. I remember two different, I want to say stories, but reflections maybe. One of them is that my daughter, who was also in the STEM field, her first year, she went through a lot of challenges, not intellectually, but just dealing with other mean white girls. And, we are as beautifully brown as can be. I would say a honey copper tone. And she was the only Latina with black hair in these spaces. And every time she would come home and tell me about her experiences, I can see how it was wearing her down.
Mm-hmm.
And so it came to a point where I told her, if you need to leave, that's okay. I'm okay with it. Because what is important for me is your mental and emotional health. I know why you're going through this, right? I've been through it. And as a mom, I've been taking care of my kids in a way that is nurturing, right? That I don't want them to experience these same harsh experiences that I did.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I have realized that, you know, when they do go out there and go through these experiences, it wears them down very fast. And that's part of taking care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
And that's what my whole parental perspective has shifted to, that I want them to be emotionally and mentally healthy first, to be able to go out there and overcome these challenges, right?
Sure.
Because a lot of it comes back to yourself. Like, what are you going to allow? What are you going to allow?
That's clarifying, because it sounds like, you know, we started off the conversation on don't stop, we need you. But what I'm hearing is that sometimes there is time to maybe throw in the towel, or if it's not throw in the towel, maybe take a break and reassess. Maybe try a new direction.
Yes, yes.
I think that's empowering, because it's not that it like lets people off the hook, but it's, I think, allowing people to recognize where maybe something's not working, or there could be a better fit somewhere else.
Yes,
Yeah.
and also having this understanding that it's not them, right?
Yeah.
It's the culture, it's the environment that they are in that's wearing them down. It's not my daughter, right? She's capable, and from what I heard from the counselors, she scored one of the top 2 math scores in this whole entry level admission process of students. But the environment is not for her.
Yeah.
And I always share this with my other friends, that our kids are smart enough to be there, but the institutions are not ready for them.
Right.
Right? It's these spaces that are not ready for them. It's the training of being mindful and respectful of other cultures that is not integrated in this freshman level 101. And I understand that many of these students drop out not just because they weren't properly prepared, but also because when they are in these spaces, it's like they're being attacked.
Interesting. I think that's I'm intrigued by the choice of word, attacked. Can you expand on that, please?
Well, it's like you know, what I was sharing earlier, that whether I speak English or not, or the comments that they told my daughter, like, why would you even consider to applying for this position in the student organization if you're the only person of color here? It's like, why wouldn't she?
Yeah.
But if they're approaching her with these type of questions, it's like, how can you not consider that an attack?
Of course, yeah.
And where was the advisor to support her application to have a leadership position in this organization? And I wasn't there to defend her.
Yeah.
And of course, she wouldn't have want me there to defend her. But these, to me, are attacks.
That makes sense.
The additional barriers from your own peers. Why? I don't know. I don't know why they would say things like that. but they do.
Yeah, it's so hurtful. I feel like a common thread I often hear is making community, in academia and in the workforce, and finding people like you were saying earlier, that can validate your experiences. But it also, I think we're coming on this idea that it's a two-way street. You can only do so much within a community before, like, everything has to kind of just open up and be open for growth.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like, when I hear things like that, it feels like the energy is stunted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is what we do. This is what we've been doing for all these years, and we're not going to change. And it makes it feel like I would, like, if I came up against that, I can't say that I wouldn't be like, I don't want to do this anymore either. I mean, because that's just, it's a brick wall. There's no flexibility. And it makes me wonder, like, what does it take for us to change and become more accepting? What does it take on, like, the institutional level for things like that to stop happening? Because I feel like we're only getting more and more diverse as a population.
Yeah, that is a good question. I think about it all the time. And when I'm asked to talk to undergraduate students, I try to remember my experiences and combine it with what I have learned, and just, go back and tell them, if you need to take a break, take a break. If you realize this is not the direction that you want to go, that's okay. Be gentle on yourself. And I say be gentle on yourself because they don't know what I know.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're just recently out of high school, first, second year. It's very hard for me to explain to them what I've learned. It's not hard. It's just that I'm not ready yet, and I don't think that that's something that I want to have them think about, I guess.
Sure.
Like, I don't want to tell them, well, it depends on what school district you went to, what type of available resources, and did they even have AP Calc? Did you have AP Calc or not? I mean, that contributes.
Oh, of course. If you don't have access to those kind of classes
Yeah.
in fields like that, you're starting at a disadvantage.
Exactly. And it just seems like it's a long talk. And in some cases, when I was interviewing some undergraduates, they even told me, you know what, we know what's happening, but I don't want to talk about it because it's mentally draining, and I need to be focused because I need to finish. And that's fair.
Yeah.
And I understand where they're coming from. And so when I go back to these groups, I remember what my interviewees told me about how draining it could be to talk about these issues.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you tell the first, second year students, right? Like, how do you support them without sharing too much? That can be overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's be gentle with yourself and learn to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Here is my contact information. Let's see how we can help you. What is it that you need? Do you need a tutor? Do you need help with your writing? Sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's knowing where they can get, what are those places where they get free like food, pantries,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Health services. Like, it just adds up. It adds up, and then you're like, wow, this is why they can't focus in school, because they have these other challenges and worries that we don't really know, in addition to the cultural climate.
Yeah, totally. And some of them are even having to work a lot while they're there.
Exactly.
People are still just trying to meet like their basic needs.
Yes.
So it becomes an issue of like we're just trying to survive and like white knuckle it through this, and I think that probably doesn't create a conducive environment for then like rising up and fighting back. It's just like we're just hanging on.
Yeah.
Like we're just trying to finish this right now, and we'll worry about the other stuff later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it's sad, but it's true. This is what many of them are going through, and I respect that because I was once there, and I once upon a time decided I didn't want to talk about it because I was barely hanging on. But I'm done, and I talk about it.
Yeah. So you have had quite the educational journey, from my understanding, and you spent a good amount of time, as have I, working through community college and figuring out what you wanted to do, and came through your undergrad all the way through your PhD as kind of a non-traditional student, a single mom of two, and I was wondering if you could maybe talk about how you made it through all of that, because I think it would be really inspiring to hear how someone with all of this stuff on their plates finished.
Well, it took me a while. And I think it took me a while for several different reasons. So I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I was reflecting the other day that I remembered every fall term I had to go to advocate for myself and talk to the counselor to get me out of remedial math.
Every term?
Every fall term.
Oh my gosh.
For some reason, they just felt the need to put me in that class. And I didn't know what it was my freshman year. But when I was there my sophomore year and I saw the same teacher, similar students, I'm like, I'm not supposed to be here. And so, I finished. I was a teenage mom, so I had my little girl in my senior year, and there was just a lot going on at home. But the moment that my daughter was born, I became an independent person and was able to apply for FAFSA. Oh, financial aid, FAFSA.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, and these are little hardships. Let me backtrack. I'm going to backtrack. I think the most challenging barrier that I've encountered is a cultural one. Because I remember when I wanted to apply to college and my mom was like, no, I really need you to help me. And that's not really for you. And so when these applications came in and I needed her signature, I needed, all the social security and information, it wasn't given to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't apply. I couldn't do anything. I was just there like a sitting duck.
Yeah.
Not being able to go left or right. And so I didn't think I was going to go to college, to be honest. I thought I was just going to start working. And then my little girl came along, and I was telling her, you were the key to opening all these doors that I didn't even know existed. And I went to community college, and the next barrier was I didn't know what I wanted to do. I started off as a teacher? Is it teacher? Childhood development.
Like early childhood?
Yes, early childhood. And I did an internship. And I think I shared this with you, and I was like, no way. I can't do this. This is a lot. I admire teachers because of that experience. I mean, it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back and I decided to take a couple of computer science courses, and I didn't like it either. I'm like, I don't get it. I mean, I'm making Alice walk forward, but I don't get it. I decided to switch to being a math teacher, and I was really good at math, but I just couldn't see myself doing that every day.
Yeah.
So it was just an adventure for me, just exploring. Um, I did architecture for a year and a half, and I was really going to go into architecture, but they took the department out. And I only did that 1 year and a half, and if I wanted to finish to transfer, I had to go to a different community college that was like 2 hours away.
Yeah, it's not
And
very accessible.
it wasn't, and so I went back to my counselor, and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. And he's like, well, you've taken all of the math, have you taken a couple of physics? I'm like, no. He's like, well, why don't you try it? So I took my first physics, and it was like love at first sight. It was brain candy. I just had so much fun with the labs, just the content. Like, it was just so much fun. And I went back and I'm like, I really like this class. Like, where do they use this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, he's like, why don't you look into engineering? And I didn't even know what engineering was at that time. And how old was I? I was like 25. 24, 25. And I didn't know what it was. And so I looked into it, and I'm like, but I really wanted to do architecture, thinking of my grandfather building structures, right? I thought that was architecture.
Mm-hmm.
It turned out that was engineering.
Mm.
But I didn't know what engineering was.
Yeah, but if for the people that don't know, it seems like very similar.
Yeah. Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And so my counselor, he helped me determine what area of engineering I was interested in. It was architectural engineering, which is also structural engineering. And I will always be grateful to him for for spending that much time with me to help me figure out what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And once I knew where I wanted to go, I transferred to UCSD, and came the next challenge, right? Because it was hard to leave home, and it was only my brother and my friend who took me to San Diego, and it was no one believed it. Everyone was like, no, she's not leaving, and I left. And then it was a different challenge there. It was a different phenomenon. It was a different learning environment. It was not community college. It was a classroom full of 200 plus students. It was very hard my first year. And I counted how many Latinos were in my classrooms, and there were very few of us. I want to say 15 in a class of like those big, large classrooms that fit over 100 students. And slowly, every year, some of them dropped out or changed their major. And I think that was a very interesting phenomenon that I didn't understand why. At that time, I didn't understand because I was making it through. I mean, yes, I had a lot of hardships and I was struggling with my 2 kids, but I still continued. And it was that phenomenon that had me wondering why did they leave? And at the same time, I did do internships with engineering, in the engineering field, and then I was hired through Create to be their coordinator. And that's when I learned more about the education system. And I was mind blown. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Everyone has different resources. What are you talking about? Not everyone has access to music, right, or the arts, which I did, and I learned through that work experience that there is a different area in engineering, such as engineering education, and that's what moved me to Oregon.
That's super interesting. I totally can relate to that feeling of getting somewhere and learning that you're having a really unique experience, that not everyone has the same access or the same the same, just I guess resources. Yeah, the resources is a good word for it, and being like, oh, well, when you put it that way, it makes so much sense. Then why, you know, my observations happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to, also give you a little bit of context, my curiosity led from, I grew up also in a single parent household, and my mom did not have time to be involved in the school or be present or the parent teacher conferences. So me and my brothers, we were always on our own, which is nice, right, as a child. But we lived in a very nice area, nice quote unquote, right, that did have all these resources available to the students. I had after school programming, free programmings. I played chess during lunch. I had access to music. I played the flute since 4th grade. My mom didn't have to pay for any of that. And so thinking about how this system was able to give me the tools to be successful, right, makes me wonder, well, aren't the same tools given to all children? What's happening here? Why didn't my peer have these extra programs after school, extra tutoring, right? Free learning how to play chess, free music lessons, art. And I was able to accomplish my goals despite having my mom not be present so much because she had to work. And that really gave me something to think about. I don't know how else to explain that reflection, but I was like, well, if I did it with this system here, why isn't a similar system established everywhere for children?
For sure, yeah. We're seeing that not all public school education is equal.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting when we are thinking about resources and then like cultural experiences at a college level, and seeing this intersectionality of you are not I guess I don't know if a better term than maybe not being welcomed in those engineering spaces in college, but you were able to have these experiences in your K-12 where you were working with or playing with students, doing chess, and you were able to experience arts and some of those extra kind of areas that sometimes get cut that really help develop those parts of your brain that support STEM and engineering, reasoning and creative thinking and problem solving, and how that gave you a leg up ultimately.
I guess so. That's something that I want to talk about with somebody else, right? Like an expert. Explain to me, how is it that all of these other factors contributed to giving me enough tools to continue?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm hearing a lot about grit too. And so I'm thinking about how, and maybe thinking of ways of how we can kind of collect all of those little bits of success and kind of distill it down to our listeners and be like, this is how we can help students kind of usher them through all of the hardships. Oh, community was another one. So also community, and then how can we take all of this that we've gained and help students either get through the programs or feel comfortable and confident in changing their minds and going in directions that may be more fitting for them.
Yeah. Well, there's several components here. For me, at least in my experience, what I've learned to appreciate is our educators, because they do a lot for students like me in K-12. And to me, it's like, how do we support them? How do we give them the tools? Because not all educators are going to know the hardships of the students.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, they are creating an impact in that student's life. And so how do we better support and prepare our educators and these in these systems?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first part, like to me, from K-12 or PK-12. The other part is for those students who do end up going to a four-year institution or college, or do decide to go into this into the STEM field. How do we improve the climate for them?
Mm-hmm.
How do we support them and build community for them?
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to go back to Dominga, who had just transferred to a four-year,
Mm-hmm.
I would tell her, you can do this, right? You need to learn to take care of yourself, and you need to learn to ask questions, ask for help, and find your community.
Mm-hmm.
The finding the community was really hard, because I don't think I found it in the engineering area. I found it elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I still like, I was glad I found it.
Yeah.
That space, where, and it was my job, my part-time job at UCSD for the early academic outreach program. That was my community, and I was a tutor coordinator. So I trained other undergraduates to go tutor math and English in these underserved communities. And for some reason, it was that area, that space, that really helped me. And I can think about one specific person, which is my my supervisor at that time, Dr. Mario Aguilar, who was always very supportive and understanding. He was validating my experiences. He was letting me express what I was going through, and he said, no, I know, I've heard it before. He probably did not go through it, I'm not sure, because we never really talked about his experiences, but he was there to validate my experiences and to tell me to keep going. And just that one person made such a huge difference in my undergraduate experience.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Oh, I love that you were able to find that. Can I kind of piggyback off that idea a little bit?
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, we talk about what our educators can do and, what the people that are like living the experience can do. But I feel like something that keeps coming up for me is like, maybe like everyone entering that space could just kind of, they could enter that classroom or that program, that cohort, and they could just be like, you know what, I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be a nice person, and I'm going to be open to new experiences and learning new things and recognizing or trying to recognize that like everyone is a little bit different, but at the end of the day, like we're more similar than we are different, and just being nice. Yeah. I feel I so often feel like a lot of the through lines is that people are just mean and not and not very understanding and unwilling to bend. And I'm wondering if maybe we were all just like a little bit more open to each other, if that would be able, the community would be more easily accessible or easy to find.
Yeah, I wonder too. I know that, you know, when I decided to come to pursue my graduate experience, graduate school, it felt like I was starting all over again. But also felt like I was properly trained. And that experience, that undergraduate experience, helped me develop what they call a thick skin.
Yeah.
That what was coming at me, I'm like, just brushed it off. And I don't know, it's not the right way to go about it, right? But I came in a little stronger and prepared, and knowing what happens in these environments and these spaces.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, if folks can be a little bit more open-minded and inviting of other people's cultural backgrounds and life experiences, it'd probably be a better experience.
Totally. Yeah, you might make some new friends that you weren't expecting to if, I don't know, you just said hello to your neighbor in class. But I really wanted to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today and being vulnerable about your experiences, going through school and everything. And yeah, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Casey.
Thanks for listening to Closing the Gap. This podcast is a production of the Mid-Valley STEM-CTE Hub. If you would like to be part of the conversation, fill out our interest form at midvalleystem.org/closingthegap. If you like the show, follow us on Spotify to stay up to date with the newest episodes. And for STEM news in the Mid-Willamette Valley, follow the Mid-Valley STEM-CTE Hub on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.